gavel us in, or how do we work that? It would just, how should we do that?
You could just call a meeting to
Okay,
order
I'll do
and
that.
then, yeah, we can,
Do a handoff.
yeah.
All right, this is what is the date today? This is the September 22nd Board of Adjustment meeting. And we are going to be now in session. And since our chairman is not here this evening, I'm going to ask that the members who are here discuss amongst yourselves and determine who you would like to be acting chairman for this evening's meeting. Kristen, I'm not sure if it requires, if it's that formal or if it could just be a very informal discussion. Do we have to have nominations and seconds and all of that kind of thing?
So is the chair simply not here or we don't have
Well,
a chair?
I don't know.
I don't know, we had two members, one of them actually moved out of state, that was Linda. Was it Linda Brown?
Yes.
Okay.
She didn't
And the
do
other
that.
one, I'm not sure, and I believe he was the chair,
Joe Elliott?
yes.
Yeah, Joe Elliott has moved out of the city. So if that is the case, then we do not have a chair.
Okay, so then I would suggest we do nominations.
Okay.
And you can basically just nominate anyone, and then you take that, if there are more than one nominations, then you can take them in order and vote until you have a majority, so.
So I guess I would ask if anybody has a nomination for chairman.
I nominate this gentleman. I
John-
don't know his name.
Next to you, Mr. Bond, John Bond? Okay. Would there be a second to that? All right, John, are you willing to serve as the chairman of the board?
I will.
Okay,
Thank you.
well, I think, do we need to go through a vote, or is it, I think we've got,
I think we have consensus. Yes, nodding heads, yes, okay.
all right.
I think we're good.
Thank you, Mr. Bond, or excuse me, Chairperson Bond.
That was good enough.
All right. So my name's Kyle Harris. Nice to meet everyone. Kind of introduce myself to all of you. I'm the new planner here, City of Cape Canaveral. Going to introduce the item tonight, variance 2022-01. It's 303 East Central Boulevard. The applicant, John Dean, is requesting a variance of 3.1 feet from the required setback of 10 feet in the R1 zoning district. Hey, can you go to the next page?
Kyle, sorry, can you just clarify, so is it 3.1 feet reduction of the setback?
Yeah, sorry, for a total of 6.9 feet.
Okay, thank you.
So we're going to hand out a copy of the plat that this property is included in, as well as the property appraiser card.
Applicants represent.
You can give her this one, I don't.
Yeah, I think that was right. All right, the variance is being requested. The applicant wants to build an addition to their room, to their home, to be used as storage on the western side of the home. The property kind of jogs inward, resulting in a setback that would be around 7 feet rather than the required 10 feet. Up here is the survey, as well as a SketchUp that the applicant has provided, just showing the proposed addition. We go to the next slide. Here's a screenshot from the plat of Cape Canaveral Beach Gardens. It was platted in 1964. I gave you all a copy of the full plat. So you can see the property now is split. sort of almost in the middle here. So it's not the exact property, but as you can see, the line was doing this in 1964 when it was platted. So it was not the current applicant who created this lot line. The The unnecessary and undue hardship, that is the section of code. Sorry about that.
Actually, I think we got a little, while Kyle's looking that up, Mr. Chairman, I think we got things a little out of order. One of the things that we wanted to do, and we can go back to it, is we can certainly need to do a roll call, which we failed to do. And we also need to approve, I think there was a set of minutes
yes.
in the agenda packet. So I believe we can take that out of order once we get this item squared away and get the board to take action on this particular item, but we will need to go back and address those other two items. All right, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
All right, so the applicant has filled out the variance application worksheet that includes a section going over our code section 11062. Included in this is the conditions of our code that should be met in order to qualify the applicant for a variance, just proving that a hardship exists. The section of code that I want to draw attention to is 11062B. That the literal interpretation of the provisions of the zoning ordinance would deprive the applicant of rights commonly enjoyed by other properties in the same zoning district and would put unnecessary and undue hardship on the applicant. This is something that the applicant, as you can see from the property card, currently has a single-family home on the property, similar to a lot of the homes in the area. Unnecessary and undue hardship would imply that they cannot make reasonable use of their property. So I just wanted to draw attention to that.
Yeah, I'd like to add a little bit, members of the board, that when Kyle references the property card, it will be this handout that you all should have received earlier. And basically what this is a detailed sheet that the property appraiser provides as part of their information on their website. And you can see it just gives particular details about any property. And here we want to draw attention to a couple of items. The first is that the home was built in 1987, which was after obviously the property was platted in 1962, I believe. And the property was purchased in 1987, or it was built in 1987, excuse me. And the lot configuration was as it is today. So that's important to understand that the lot configuration remains as is. And also another important thing that Kyle has referred to is that the square footage of the home is, according to the property appraiser's information here that you have in front of you, is 2,605 square feet. So I think the point that we are making is that the property owner does have reasonable use of his property, very similar to what other property owners have in the area. And I think Kyle is going to go through the other criteria that must be considered when the board is looking at a variance request. There are 5 criteria in our code, and it's important that the board consider each one of those and as you're going through your deliberations.
So the first condition, that special conditions and circumstances exist which are unique to the land, structure, or building involved and are not applicable to other lands, buildings, or structures in the same district. I think the unique western lot line has been the focus of the variance request. The lots in the area, Patty, can you go back 2 slides to the aerial? A lot of the lots in that area do have the rectangular shape. That, you know, if there were an addition to the side, it may not encroach into the setbacks necessarily. B, this is the one I had mentioned earlier. The literal interpretation of the provisions of the zoning ordinance would deprive the applicant of rights commonly enjoyed by other properties in the same zoning district and would put unnecessary and undue hardship on the applicant. I spoke about that a little bit as far as the applicant having reasonable use of their property. That the special conditions and circumstances referred to in item A above do not result from the actions of the applicant. So this is why the plat was provided to show that this was done by a previous property owner. It was not the applicant that split the lot this way. The granting of the variance requested will not confer on the applicant any special privileges that are denied by the ordinance to other lands, structures, or buildings in the same district. This is kind of goes along with the A.
I think the important point on this criteria is that the owner, the current owner, does have reasonable use of the property, and very much like other owners in the area. So the owner is not being unduly impacted by the configuration of the lot. So he does have a reasonable enjoyment, use of the property.
That the reasons set forth in the application justify the granting of the variance, and that the variance, if granted, is the minimum that would make possible use of the land, building, or structure. This is not necessarily the minimum would be to not get a variance at all, because the land is currently in use. It is the minimum if he is to get the addition. Because it's being added kind of flush with the existing western wing on that building. And then the final condition, that the granting of the variance will be in harmony with the general intent and purpose of the zoning code and will not be injurious to the neighborhood or otherwise detrimental to the public welfare. This one just kind of, it is a relatively small addition. I don't know if there's anything you want to add. But
Yeah, I'll just add this thing in conclusion, this comment in conclusion is that when the board is looking at a variance request, I think you need to have an affirmative answer to all 5 of those criteria. Even if the application does not meet one of those criteria, that is justification for the board to deny the request. And I think we're trying to focus the board on that the applicant does have reasonable use of his property. And the addition is not not something that is, I don't want to say needed, but it is something above and beyond what his home, what he has now. And therefore, I think that is the big reason why staff is recommending denial of the request. If there's any questions, we'd be happy to answer them. The applicant's representative is here. Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure if you'd like to entertain any comments or thoughts from the applicant's representative, but I know he is here.
Oh, absolutely. And I believe you're the attorney, right? Okay, go ahead and step up to the podium so we can get you on recording.
So, I don't know if the board has the full application packet that I do, but I've got copies if you don't.
I believe we had the whole package, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
Sorry, excuse me, Mr. Madoni. I did want to just say something to the board before you begin your presentation. We do have a section of the code that's 110-30.1 that talks about attendance being required at public hearings. I believe I have spoken to Mr. Vidoni. I informed him that the applicant, the owner of the property is not present, he couldn't be present today. So just for the board's information, we can't rely on attorney testimony, right? It wouldn't constitute competent and substantial evidence.
Okay.
So Mr. Vinoni certainly can talk about the documents that are already in the record and in the application. But to the extent that the board needs to ask questions and gather additional factual information, let's say from the applicant, I would suggest at that time that you would need to actually continue the hearing so you can hear from the applicant later.
Okay. And so you're saying that no new evidence can be brought forward? Okay.
Correct.
So we have to rely on what we have, and that's the packet that was given to us. And then, you know, and of course, whatever we did on our own time to go to research it as well.
Yes, I mean, we need to base the decision on the evidence that is in the record. And like I've already spoken to Mr. Vidoni about this, that he can certainly make arguments based on that. But to the extent the board needs additional information or wants to ask additional questions, you would need to probably continue the hearing and ask the applicant to provide that.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Just to respond to that, I'm not aware, I know that there is a code provision that does require the applicant isn't defined in the code as far as I was able to tell. Typically in the law that when you have the name for a party that is considered interchangeable with the attorney, for example, in the rules of civil procedure, it commonly refers to the defendant and the plaintiff, okay? Now, every time that every action is taken in the litigation, the individual party doesn't go and sign the pleadings or file the documents, the attorney does that. And so commonly in the law, the term party is essentially interchangeable with attorney. Defendant is interchangeable with the defendant's attorney. Plaintiff is interchangeable with the plaintiff's attorney. There's nothing in the code that I saw that said we're going to change that general dynamic to how the law works. So I don't necessarily know if the board has clarified that provision of the code, but as far as I read the code, it didn't seem to specifically disallow the attorney being present in lieu of the party. In terms of the way the code is written as well, I did not see anything explicitly in the code that said that attorney can't provide any sort of testimony or evidence that would necessarily need to come to the party. I think that the board wants to have that structure to be specifically outlined in the procedures section of the variance.
I know that we've had attorneys in the past, but I can't remember if the petitioner was also here or not. But David Dickey, you had a question or a comment?
Well, I had a comment, Mr. Chairman. I will say this, to the degree it's helpful to the board. We do have an application on this from the owner, Mr. Dean, and he actually signed, you can see as part of the agenda packet, he actually signed as the applicant. Nowhere in this application does it refer to him being represented. I do know that after the application was submitted, at that point, it was determined by Mr. Dean that he would not be available for the meeting this evening. At that point, he reached out and secured some counsel. So I just would recommend that the the board consider that the applicant, for purposes of the application, is indicated this was signed by Mr. Dean.
So,
No, I was going to say is, so long as we don't introduce any new evidence, then we'll be good. Yeah, I mean, I'm okay with this if you are.
yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, Mr. Vidoni, your argument is obviously preserved on the record. I believe that there is ample case law regarding quasi-judicial hearings that states attorneys cannot provide, competent and substantial evidence for a quasi-judicial hearing. I think we can move on from that. I think the other thing I would mention, though, is that the section does clearly state that during the course of a public hearing, the board may, on its own motion, table or postpone consideration of an application for any of the following reasons, including because they would like to afford interested parties an opportunity to testify and provide additional relevant evidence. Or, you know, so I think that the board has the authority to ask to continue the matter if you would like to.
Well, do we also have the ability to just listen to the attorney?
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
Guys okay with that?
I propose that we go as far as we can. If the board is looking for other extra information to make its decision that it would only be able to obtain from my client, we can continue at that point. But if it has enough information based on what we can discuss today, and some of it's not really facts that are really in dispute, like this is an overshot of what my client's house looks like, this is what the lot lines are, a lot of things are kind of just there. There's certainly argument as to the points required for the variance, and I think, you know, there's limited evidence that I have regarding other lots that kind of exceed the 10-foot variance that are in the area that I don't think are very contested anyway. It's pretty apparent from the overshot views of the houses, but I can go forward and answer the 6 elements required by the Cape Canaveral Code for variance, if I may be allowed to proceed.
So, yes, and then I'll have a question as well, but go ahead.
Okay. The first one was the special conditions and circumstances exist which are peculiar to the land, structure, or building involved, which are not applicable to other land, building, structures in the same zoning district. I think staff and myself, I think, are on the same page with that. Is that is a oddly shaped lot that my client didn't create. It's created in such a way that it limits the buildable area of the property. Most of the lots created in Cape Canaveral are rectangular in shape, generally speaking. And this does not conform with that. It's even a little bit odd in the sense, if you look at the property to the west, it kind of is shaped in such a way where you have the borders kind of coming out rather than a border coming in. I looked at the City of Cape Canaveral lot lines on the Brevard County Property Appraisers website. I think it was a fairly unique configuration to have that lot line coming in and taking away property rather than just a more expensive lot line that just expand out like the lot to the west. So that's the what qualifies as meeting the first element, essentially what I would call the peculiarity element of the test. The second part is literal interpretation of this chapter would deprive the applicant of rights commonly enjoyed by other properties in the same zoning district. I mean, the term for this chapter would unnecessarily and would work unnecessary and undue hardship on the applicant. I think it's very clear that you have the surrounding properties that are rectangular in shape. Usually when people are making additions onto the property, they can just expand out and kind of meet within the general parameters of setback requirements just based on meeting the rectangular shape of the lot. And because my client's lot was not given that, he just has to make do with the weird shape that he has. In other words, where other people would be able to move either diagonally or horizontally or vertically, depending on where you're looking at a square house on a rectangular lot, my client is limited in his ability to make those extensions. The third element is that the special conditions and circumstances referred to in subsection 1 or subsection A not result from the actions of the applicant. I think the staff and myself are in agreement that my client didn't reach the lot lines. So it created in its current configuration since 1986. And that when my client purchased the property in 2021, again, he still had the same lot lines. It was something that he came to. The fourth element is the approval of the variance will not confer on the applicant any special privilege that is denied by this chapter to other lands, buildings, or structures in the same zoning district. And I want to provide some pictures regarding how the setbacks exist with regard to other properties in the same neighborhood. So,
Attorney, are we, is this new evidence or is this just continuing?
I think that this could be allowed unless you have, because it's a document, you don't usually have to provide like foundational
that's fine.
evidence on
Okay.
that. But if you had questions about what you see in the pictures, that's not something that we would be able to answer.
okay. So, this document I have is a printout from the Brevard County Property Appraisers website that kind of shows the approximate boundary lines. I think largely replicates the application approach.
Yes, yes, please.
Thank you. So, one of the things that you'll look at, just looking at, you have that scale that's provided by the property appraiser. And I understand that the lot lines given by the property appraiser aren't always accurate, but lining them up to where the fence line is, you usually can come up with a fairly good idea to where setbacks are. You were given a scale by the property appraiser up on the top of the approximate footage. You look at the condominium development that is to the west, and you have that roof line that is actually overhanging that 10-foot scale provided by the property appraiser's website. So even in the same neighborhood, you got a issue with the setbacks. Even the house to the south with its pool enclosure would not meet the 10-foot setback that is being imposed on my client. So you look at the how everything is laid out, adherence to that 10-foot setback just in those three parcels is consistently non-compliant with the setback requirement. So essentially in the same neighborhood amongst neighbors, my client is essentially just looking to maximize the use of his property in the same way that his other neighbors are doing. We have.
May I ask a question, Chair?
Yes.
Mr. Vidoni, do you have any evidence of other variances or anything for those properties?
I don't know if they've had variances or not, but I'm just
Okay.
talking about these in terms of the fact that we've got 5 elements that deal with whether this is going to ruin the character of the community and be inconsistent with the character of the community. I think the variance actually maintains consistency with the community rather than not. So that's really all we're going to show. We're not trying to show any sort of different treatment or anything. We're just trying to show that largely in this same neighborhood, we're getting into a lot of properties that don't really fit within the 10-foot setback requirements, and it's actually consistent with the neighborhood not to strictly apply that setback requirement. I've got a second document, which is more of a close-up. Like that. those neighboring properties. The also have the third printout from the property appraiser's website. And this is actually across the street. If you were to, so essentially, if you look at those printouts, you have the condominium with that pool there. If you head west across Navarro Beach Boulevard, you'll get to a commercial piece of property. And
So, just for the record, can we mark you've turned in 3 different pictures. Mr. Chairman, I'd suggest we mark them in some way, like exhibit 1.
We already have it, exhibit letters, or can we just start from A?
Dave, you haven't labeled anything.
I've
As an
not seen
exhibit.
I've not seen these handouts until this evening from
Okay.
the, so we would need to, you'd need to come up with some type of a 1, 2, 3 or A, B, C. Or an A. We had attachments, but not.
Okay,
so the first, are we doing 1, 2, 3?
Let's just do ABC.
Okay.
Let's see here. I'm not doing them in any particular order. But go ahead and continue, please.
All right, so that next property shows I think it's a commercial building. And here, the property appraiser's lines are not correctly lined up. Kind of see how they're transgressing the townhouses to the south. Those lines should actually be moved up probably about 15, 20 feet to match up with that fence line that you can see from the top. But if you were to move those lines, you can see the commercial property that's to the west. You have a rooftop that looks like it only has about 4 feet of distance between that fence line where the lot line should be and the roof overhang. So even there, you got inconsistency with the 10-foot.
I think on that particular property, I think the city's been dealing with that for a good number of years and trying to work with that anyway, so.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I also want to point out a couple of things, if appropriate now too, is that we've got a number of zoning districts in this area too. I mean, the property immediately to the west of the subject property is zoned R2, which has different setback requirements than R1 properties. Also, if you recall, the setbacks in R1 say, I believe it's 8 feet on the side, we're talking side property setbacks, 8 feet or 10% of the lot frontage, whichever is greater, okay? So, you know, I think, I appreciate this information, but I think that it's important for the board to remember that we're not comparing apples and apples here, because this particular property is 101.65 linear feet, the frontage. The adjacent pieces and some of the other pieces that are being referred to may have different dimension, the frontage standards or lengths. So in the side yard setbacks are going to vary property by property based on that. So I think to paint just a broad picture of, hey, my property is not the same as my next door property. There's reasons for that potentially.
So you're comparing the R1 with the R2 and R3?
Yeah.
Okay.
I understand that point, that there are different zoning classifications for different properties that we're talking about. But if you look at the 6th one, it says the approval of the variance will be in harmony with the general intent and purpose of the chapter and will not be injurious to the neighborhood or otherwise detrimental to the public welfare. We're talking about injurious to welfare. Basically, almost every you know, every other property is not within a 10-foot setback, it can't be considered to be detrimental to the neighborhood or the public welfare. So we're just showing that there's, the plan as proposed by my client is not inconsistent with the way the lots were developed in this community and how the lots are. It's actually somewhat consistent. So the next exhibit I have, I guess, would be Exhibit D. This is a picture of the lot line from Google Maps of that commercial building. And,
Sure, yeah.
look at the, concrete is going back, and the where the lot line is being maintained, we're dealing with a space that's less than 10 feet on 251 Circle Drive.
I think we're getting, we're getting a little redundant here. And so, and I think we understand your point on that. But again, like Mr. Dickey said, you know, we're talking about different zoning variations. And so, do you have anything new?
Yeah, I have one other piece of photographic evidence. This is around 272 Canaveral Beach, it's a residential piece of property. We've got a similar issue where we have less than 10 feet. And
While he's doing that, one quick question. This is a non-conforming property currently?
Well, it is I'm going to characterize it like this, Mr. Chairman. The city, the side setbacks are 10 feet. You can see from the survey that the eastern setback is 9.1 or 9.1 feet between the structure and the property. So I think I would characterize it as this property was, when it was built, was encroaching into the side setback area. Now, I don't know if Kristen, you want to add anything to that, but I think that's how I would characterize it. I'm not going to say illegally built because the city permitted it, but there was an encroachment, an illegal encroachment not consistent with the setbacks. You know, I wasn't here in 1986 when the house was built. I can't give you an exact reason why that situation happened, but all I can tell you is today I would consider that an illegal encroachment into the side yard setback.
Was the 10 feet setback requirement in effect when
It's a good
it was built?
question. It's a good question. Yes, that zoning district was in place and the standard was in place.
Okay,
That's always a good question to ask.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
thank you. Just returning back to the fourth point, the approval of the variance requested will not confer on the applicant any special privilege as denied by the statute to other lands, buildings, and structures in the same zoning district. That was kind of within the same neighborhood. We have several properties, some of which are residential, that are not compliant with the same 10-foot setback requirement. It can't be said that there's really a consistent pattern through the neighborhood of having that 10-foot setback requirement. On number 5, that the requested variance is the minimum variance from this chapter necessary to make possible the reasonable use of the land, building, and structure. In addition, we're talking about an addition that is adding about 120 square feet. It's really extending the line into, it's kind of applying almost a 7-foot variant or setback requirement. And then we have a line coming out directly from the wall to the north, heading south. And then when that corner comes into that 7-foot limit, it's curving at an angle slightly to the east so that it maintains that 7-foot setback. So the plan as proposed by my client is attempting to comply with at least the spirit of the 10-foot setback of, we're gonna have setback, we're not living in a world where there are no setbacks, but it's really trying to conform that plan so that you do not need to violently encroach into the 10-foot setback. We're just going into 3 foot of that 10-foot setback. The sixth one is that approval of the variance will be in harmony with the general intent and purpose of this chapter and will not be injurious to the neighborhood or otherwise detrimental to public welfare. The proposed addition does not significantly expand the space taken up by the house. It would increase the square footage to approximately 2,725 square feet. The other homes in the area are similar size. And I think that's pretty much most of the argument. I do also have a video compiled by my client that kind of takes you in his backyard and shows you kind of where everything is and how the plan is supposed to work.
Yeah, I don't know that we need to go that far. And unless you gentlemen want to see it, and that would be probably, these other pictures that you showed us are I think is the word prima facie. I mean, it's just fact. And whereas a video would be subjective and considered new evidence. And I don't know, but I don't know that I'm going to need that, but go ahead. What do you think? So.
I don't think. I guess I'm gonna bring up a thing with you because.
Listen. You have a comment, Dave?
Yeah, thank you. I guess, Mr.
Vidoni.
Vidoni, I apologize. Mr. Vidoni has concluded his presentation. Is that-
Yeah,
Okay.
I think I just went over the points that we needed, what our position is on those things.
Okay, thank you. I guess I'll just characterize it as in rebuttal or in summary of the staff's position is that it really comes down, in our mind, it comes down to criteria 2 or B, is that the applicant has the ability to enjoy his property. He has a 2,600 square foot home on the property. And the board needs to consider, in my mind, that is an addition, is the not being able to build an addition on the house, is that a hardship, an undue hardship on the property owner? That's really what it kind of boils down to in our mind. And our position is that it's not. He is able to enjoy the property, and it's more of a want than a need. So anyways, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And if I may rebut that a little bit, the whole thing about it being want or need, nobody needs to build a piece of property on any particular land.
Understood.
Whether we, allow someone to build or not, that's not necessarily the test. I think that the requirement of unnecessary or undue hardship is prefaced in a large part by the previous section of that element. It says that it would deprive the applicant of the rights commonly enjoyed by other properties in the same zoning district. So essentially, I think you need to look at unnecessary and undue hardship within that lens. Is it creating, are the other elements and all the other facts, are they creating a disparity of rights between different properties in the same area that my client doesn't enjoy. Is it really necessary or to impose that hardship on him? I don't think that it is necessary to keep that zoning the way it is. The reason we have variances is because not everything's always going to be uniform. We've got peculiarities that arise that the city council has the board has the ability to deal with, so that we can kind of come to an approach that at least maintains the spirit of the zoning requirements, if not the letter of the zoning requirements, and that's what we're doing here. Okay.
I'll just, I would advise the board that I don't believe that's the legal standard. The criteria, number 2 is, whether it would be an unnecessary and undue hardship on the applicant to apply the zoning code as is. And I believe that there is ample case law that interprets what that means. And that means that it is unnecessary, when it says unnecessary and undue hardship, that means that the applicant cannot have reasonable use of their property without the variance. So, Mr. Vidoni, again, your argument's preserved for the record, but I don't believe that that's the legal standard.
Okay. You don't have anything else right now?
No.
Okay, thank you. Don't have any comments, questions? Mine, do you have anything? The one thing that I looked up was, I'm sorry, go ahead. The one thing I looked up was the section 110-193. And if the property has some type of nonconformity already, we are not allowed to make it worse as per subsection A. And no structure may be enlarged or altered in a way which increases its nonconformity. And so it could be considered splitting hairs. I don't know. And I went to the property, looked around. I did not step on the property, but looked at it from a couple of different angles. And as I always do in situations like this, I probably just going to have to go with with staff's recommendation and vote no. And the reason being, I know you talked about the other properties, but they are being dealt in a different way. The one property that has all the townhouses, I know that's been a subject that the city's been dealing with for the last 30 some odd years, actually. And the R2 next door, I can't speak for that one, but it is a different zoning. And so I'm just going to go ahead and leave my comments as that.
I saw the property also, and I agree fully with what you're saying and also what you're saying. That I see no hardship in the property. It's a very nice property, and I haven't seen any reason for a hardship, and it should stay as is. Variance it.
The way I feel is, the other criteria here are somewhat, I'll say soft. You have to argue each one. But the one that the chairman just noted seems a little bit more black and white. Yeah, 9.1 feet isn't much of a nonconformity, but now 3 feet is becoming, I think, a little bit more serious. And where do we stop? Do we go down the proverbial slippery slope, and now other areas are going to use this to change their properties as well? My other thought is, if the lot was rectangular would it be approved? Would the variance be approved? And I doubt it. So I'm also going to vote no.
Are we ready for a motion? Does anybody have anything, staff? Did you want to make a motion, either one of you gentlemen?
I'll second.
Well, let's hear the motion,
The motion is,
okay?
I'll second.
All right, are you gonna, who's taking roll?
Mr. Bond,
No.
Mr. Slayton,
Oh, wait, let's hear the motion again and get this correct. Okay, so your motion is to deny the variance. Okay. And, so I will, I am for the motion. And then go ahead, and then you go ahead, ma'am. Okay,
I agree with the motion.
okay. Mr. Bond, Mr. Slayton, and Mr. Weber.
okay. And I don't like doing stuff like this, but in this particular case, I don't see the need to do that.
All right, well, thank you for
Thank
listening to
you.
my
Thank
argument
you.
and giving me my client a shot.
You're a good attorney.
Thank you.
All right, so now we have a couple of pieces of business to take care of.
Actually, Mr. Vaughn, sorry, and before Mr. Benoni leaves, I would just suggest to, would the board entertain a motion to adopt the findings in the staff report as well?
Oh, okay, we can do that. I'll make a motion that we accept the findings of the staff report as written.
I'll second.
Okay. Patty, are we going to do a roll call again? Okay, sorry, I didn't mean to hurry you.
Mr. Bond,
Yes,
Mr. Slayton, Mr. Weber.
thank you very much.
Thank
Be
you.
well. All right. We've already got a roll call done earlier. And as the new chair, I'm going to go ahead and finish up with some of the old business. In this case, we have public participation. I don't know that there's any public here right now, so we'll pass by that. Do we have any old business that we need to take care of?
I think, no, not old business.
What about the meeting minutes?
That would be,
That's coming up.
that'll be coming up.
Okay. All right, so the new business, now, the first segment of the new business is that we need to go ahead and approve the meeting minutes of April 8th, 2021. I can't believe it's been that long since we've met. And so I need a motion to approve I know you two gentlemen were not here. I'm going to make the motion. I'm going to make the motion that we approve the meeting minutes of April 8th, 2021. I've read through them. They appear to be correct if my memory is intact.
I'll second.
Yes, you have to vote. Yes. The sunshine law requires that you vote. So even if you weren't here, you can ask Mr. Bond if you have any questions on the minutes, but yeah, you do have to vote.
Okay.
And Kristen, at the time Joe Elliott was here and he was the chairperson, so would Mr. Bond sign?
Yes, I would
Yes,
have
I have
him
the pages
sign.
to sign here, right here.
Okay. Yeah.
I will do that as soon as we gavel. And now the next item to be discussed was the one we've already done, was the quasi, which is new business B, quasi judicial and or public hearing, the consideration and action on variance number 2022-01. Do I need to read that entire variance? I mean, the entire description?
You need to read it?
Yes.
No.
Okay.
In the
All right,
record,
so
no.
that's been taken care of, that's done. All right. So now, reports and open discussion. Basically, if anybody has any comments of any type, now's the time to discuss it.
Let's have a question. Sitting here, are we able to ask questions of anybody here?
Yes.
Okay.
We just have to,
This is, I really view staff's role as we're here to help you in your capacity as a board member. We are to provide you with an analysis of the applicable rules and regulations and code sections that apply to any specific or any given application that's in front of you. We'll provide you with our recommendation. And we'll answer any questions you might have about the application. I'm not sure, have any of you been involved in any of our board training? We might, that might be something we want to do, Kristen, I don't know, maybe next time we have a meeting, maybe we could spend, I don't know, half an hour before the meeting or after the
I think
meeting.
it's a great idea.
Yeah, I'd love
And,
it.
and have some training, some board training
Yeah.
on sunshine. And when I say sunshine, that's sunshine law. It's very important for board members. You need to understand that.
And then the three of us cannot discuss this until we are gaveled into the meeting.
Right. And you really shouldn't be talking about it out on the street, so to speak, with folks. I think you need to consider this as in quasi judicial settings. You need to consider this your courtroom, and you're in through judges, and you really shouldn't be out in the street gathering testimony and information. You should be doing that in your courtroom. That's kind of a general way to look at it. But if we could, Kristen, if we could plan on that maybe next time, maybe we can get you back and provide some training, some basic board training, because I think that'd be important. I think that'd
Do
be
you have
really
any
good.
documentation to send out before that too? And that would help us understand, help them understand it more.
Yes.
I'm pretty sure I do have a handout for the sunshine law that I
Okay.
can email to all of you.
Because like David Dickey said, I mean, the quasi judicial is a lot different than most other meetings. We have to be very careful.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to do that. I've also done training that's not, I mean, it covers sunshine law, but also gets into the different types of applications that the board is asked to review. And we actually talk about some of these criteria and what they mean, like, provide you some case law and things like that, to help you understand what they mean.
Let's plan on doing that, if that's
Okay.
all right with the members of the
Sounds
board.
good. Anybody else have anything? Congratulations, you two. Welcome aboard. And it'll get easier as it goes along. The hard part is when, years ago, we used to meet every month. But now, well, you figure it's been over a year.
Yeah, I was
So,
told
yeah.
3 times a year.
Okay. Sorry, before we adjourn, I don't think, did we actually vote on the minutes?
I think we did a roll call.
Yeah, we did
No,
a roll
we
call.
didn't.
No, we didn't. I don't think you
Oh,
did.
no, maybe we didn't. All
I
right,
think it
but
was-
I made the motion though, correct?
You
Okay.
made
Yeah.
a motion,
All right.
Mr. Weber seconded, but I didn't do a
Okay, go
roll
ahead with the
call.
roll call vote, please. Sorry.
Okay, Mr. Bond,
For the motion.
Mr. Slayton, and Mr. Weber. Thank you.
And so I will do that. Okay, if there's nothing else before this meeting, I will adjourn at 6:58.
Thank you.
This is